Hello, friend. It is good to see you. And that begs the question, just who are you? That, in fact, is the theme of our message today, understanding who you are. The various different aspects of yourself, how they all interplay, how they're all connected, and, through this understanding, getting a more whole view of yourself. Guiding our reading today, we have Sylvanus. Sylvanus is the king of the woodlands. He offers you this mask of truth. That is, when we come into this world, we put on this mask, this identity that we create, this identity that's given to us. And at first, we might actually end up forgetting who we are, right? Imagine you came into this world, you didn't really, forget who you were. Would you take the effort to really focus, to consciously, connect with who you are? No, you wouldn't. It's kind of like knowing, if you know the end of a movie, would you watch it? If you know how the end of a game goes, would you watch it? Would you play it? You probably wouldn't, right? So you put on this mask, this new identity, these experiences, whatever culture you've been raised in, maybe whatever religious or spiritual background that you've been, taught as you were growing up. You put on this mask, and for a while you walk around with this identity that's been given to you, and there is a certain measure of truth to it, but there's also a certain measure of untruth to it, right? You obviously, you like the things you like, you have the experiences you had, in your life, and these things are all true because they all feed into your, your sense of identity, the ego. Not the ego in the sense of the overinflated sense of self, but the ego in the sense of, like, when somebody calls out your name, you know that it's you that they're speaking to. Okay. Now, you go through life, with this mask for a little while, but if you decide that you wanted to kind of do some of that inner work to really understand who you are, eventually what happens is you notice you have this mask. You take it off, and you just see yourself as you are without, the cultural conditionings, without the identifications, without, that I work at this job, I have these hobbies, I identify this way or that way. You see this aspect of yourself that's beyond these outer, appearances, and then you kind of start to realize that there's an interaction between this inner world and this outer world. And this is where you can start to really see the truth of not only who you are, but how this dynamic, this interplay between these two different sides of the coin come together, and, the interaction of them making the whole of who you are. Okay. We have the Two of Pentacles. If you think about the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, you would have an individual walking on the tightrope. They're juggling the two pentacles. That's their inner world and their outer world. The Fae in this card, she's juggling these fruits, nuts, and grains. Some of them are falling down into her little basket here. She's got this little juggling act, right? You got this focus on your inner world. You got the focus on the outer world. You're doing this juggling. Okay. So, if you have been tending to your inner world, your outer world is also going to be growing as a result of that. In this deck, the story is you have these two little Fae girls who have this rose garden, and they discover this blue rose in their garden. It's a very special, beautiful, magical rose. The qualities of it are exceptional, right? And they're taking care of it for a little bit, but eventually it gets beyond their ability to tend to nurture to, and the flower wilts. So they decide to ask the queen for help, this queen, okay? And she agrees to help them. She comes and she pours magic into this rose, and it does revive, and it grows and it flourishes, but the rest of the garden around her grows as well, right? And she doesn't notice the things, the vines growing, the other flowers blooming, until it's too late, until she's got this vine wrapped all around her. Okay, you probably got kind of entangled a little bit in this outer world. This isn't actually necessarily a bad thing, because when you get entangled in this outer world, Spirit, this crow representing Spirit, comes along, plucks that little blue rose to bring your attention, right? You realize, oh, I feel this sense of disconnect, or this could even be a sense of maybe you are doing some dream work, astral travel, maybe some shamanic journeying if you are a practitioner. Either way, you come to this point where you can see, you got this outer world around you that has grown, and there's a lot you have to, you kind of tend to in life, but then you have this inner world, right? You come to, some sort of a dynamic, an agreement. There is a connection between the inner and outer. You might have in some, spiritual or religious backgrounds this idea that the physical and the spiritual are separate. Some people feel like this physical world that we live in is like a prison, or that you're too limited here, and you're just looking forward to when you finally pass into this more spiritual state. But you have these two boys here in this two of wands shaking hands. There's an agreement to look out for each other, right? What you're doing in the physical does have an effect in the spiritual, and what you're doing in the spiritual has an effect in the physical. It's a cycle. So you start to explore the inner world. This Queen of Cups, she's very much in her intuition, her emotions, and you have the Queen of Swords. This is more the outer, the logical, you have this dynamic between the two. And what happens when you have this dynamic between your inner and outer is it creates something new, okay? Imagine, maybe one of these is your inner and outer world, and here is Mother Earth, right? In this card we have this Fae. She has this egg that she found for these two young boys who are going on an adventure, and she gives them the egg. She's like, hey, I don't know what this egg is, it could be anything, but, she offers it to them. They accept it, they dream. Could this be a phoenix? Could it be a dragon? Who knows, right? The thing of the matter is, when you come into this world, it's because Mother Earth, she wants to cultivate something. She has this potential that's born in you, something that wants to be created, something that wants to come into existence. Okay. Next up, we have the devil. Okay, so when we're thinking about the devil, this is more our, we'll say, lower natures. This isn't necessarily a negative thing. Unfortunately, some cultures, some religions, look at this primal kind of energy that we have in ourselves and have personified it as something negative, very evil, wrong. The devil in this deck, this satyr, he is so absolutely in touch with his primal energy that, he's an embodiment of it. He's got the beads on his beard, his earring here. He celebrates who he is. Your primal energy, your, that inner world, that energy creating this sensuality, right, within yourself. This, this lower, like I said, you have your sacral chakra, you have your root chakra. This energy is absolutely the basis, the pulse of life, right? This is where your vitality, your energy, your creativity, all these things come from. Sometimes when we have unhealthy outlets, these things can be distorted into, into behaviors or into some sort of a form that isn't really necessarily for our benefit. But if you have a healthy relationship with, these primal, more animalistic sides of yourself, you can express them in a healthy way, right? And then we have judgment. We have this higher, more kind of like angelic energy. We have the righteousness, the justice, the more kind of angelic types of beauty. And what's interesting is having these two cards together, we have this kind of dichotomy, right? You have the more primal side, and then you have the more higher side, right? The reality of the matter is we are both. We have all these types of things within us. To be a human is to be a meeting point between the upper and the lower, right? And that right there is the key to bring you into this Ten of Pentacles, right? This connection, this meeting of hearts, minds, spirits, to be embodied in this world, and to have this full satisfaction, this wealth, comes from the acknowledgement of and harmony of both sides of yourself. Now, the thing of the matter is, because we are living in this physical world, obviously, you get older, you eventually, you start to show symptoms of age. Maybe, you get aches and pains that you didn't have before. Maybe you might break a tooth. Eventually you start, maturing to where you have the wrinkles and so on and so forth. And this is actually very much a natural part of life. This is in fact a good thing. We have the Empress, and something that I had never noticed when I looked at the Empress card in this deck was that she has this torn sleeve, okay, and got a little bit of stitches. Might be a little hard to see with this camera, and her focus is on this wheat, right? The death that of the wheat that's been chopped down, allowing for new seeds or new grain to grow. Okay, she put a few little stitches on the sleeve, but she didn't completely repair it, because you're not supposed to fight against the aging process, the movement of time, because this is designed to help you understand yourself. This is designed to help you be able to do the work to really come to the realization of who you are. Maybe in your youth you were physically very strong or very mentally very sharp, and as time goes on there's this gradual decline, and then you have to kind of find new ways of working with the world around you, new ways of dealing with life to kind of compensate for these changes. And this kind of brings you a wisdom, right? This creativity that comes from the need to be able to meet life in new ways. The Eight of Cups, right? If you think about, say, the Nine of Cups, that that satisfaction, the richness, the fullness, your wishes and dreams come true, and then you think about the Eight of Cups, you just have one little cup missing, right? You're gonna always have something that you need to work towards, something that you need to work on, something that needs addressing in life, because this process, if you're just sitting there chilling out, all zen, and nothing changes and it's all still, you don't really have growth. The real growth comes from the work you need to do. Luckily for us, though, for most people, this process is actually very gradual and slow. We have this Knight of Pentacles, okay, and then we have Death, okay. Now, Death, a lot of people might find that card a little bit scary, but the reality of the matter is, she's not there to work against you, right? The decay from, previous life feeding the mushrooms, which feeds the rest of the forest, she's a little bit gentler, actually, than the Tower, right? The Tower is that sudden, powerful, life-altering type of thing. When we're looking at this, this Knight of Pentacles with Death, we're looking at this gentler, slower progression, right? It's perfectly natural. That's perfectly fine, because it eventually brings you to this, hanged fate energy. If you actively engage the realities of the life that you're living, of the world, of the changes that you experience, it causes you to to need to look inward, right? And when you look inward, that, you see yourself, it changes the way that you can interact with the world, right? You realize that you are in fact part of the cycles of the seasons. This Three of Cups. These girls, chatting, celebrating together. You might see in other versions of, the tarot, three girls dancing on their cups. You see the phases of the moon. You learn to move with the cycles because you in fact are part of those cycles, and when that happens, you get into this chariot energy. You're able to harness, the inner and the outer, the masculine and the feminine, the various opposing or apparently opposing forces in your life, and you kind of develop this confidence, right? You understand I am both my lower nature and my higher nature, right? To be human is actually to meet here in the heart, right? We are, part of this cycle. Our very existence is a manifestation of this cycle of life and death. And when you get to that, you come to embody it as the priest. This is the Hierophant of the deck. Now, he's a shaman in this particular deck, but the point is, it's about outer, manifestation or outer embodiment, right? You know that because you are part of this life and death cycle, because you have growth and decay all present in you, you are part of this whole, and when you understand who you are, then it helps you to be able to live, more in tune, in harmony with the world around you. And, we have this mask, and the mask, no longer is a matter of like, I put this image on and it's just to hide who I am. You put the mask on because this is the form you want to take in this life, right? The expression of you, it is genuinely, part of who you are, in the same way, that the rose is a part of the bush. So this is something, to think about. You are a synergy between higher and lower aspects. Who you are, it is both within and without. You don't have to wait until, you've passed on to the other side to have this spiritual experience, because you are that spiritual experience. You are, people say you're a spiritual being having a human experience. I want to challenge you to rethink that idea even. Human is spiritual. The ups and downs, the challenges, the ugly, the beautiful, it's all part of you. You are a whole being. And when you're not afraid to look at the truth of the various aspects of yourself, you really know who you are that way, that's when the magic happens. If this reading has been valuable for you, I would absolutely love it if you would drop a comment, tell me a little bit about yourself. Go ahead and like the video. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe to my channel. Head in, check out my videos. I'm sure you'll find something that resonates with you, and I will see you in the next one.